That's right, white balance. White balance is the reason I've been messing up. It has nothing to do with being anxious. Take 97 of the introduction. A lot of people have been asking me, what is this guy? Why is he there? This dummy back here. Well, his name's Framey. Framey, he helps me frame. I'll show you. Aha, now it all makes sense. Make sure that it's a good shot. So because of Framey, the frame is magnifique without having to do much messing around once the subject comes in like Father Michael. So when Father Michael is either doing something else that's way more important, like writing a book or praying, I'm left to the IT work out here, and Framey helps me get a really good frame job so that when we're ready to start recording, it's ready to go. It's kind of appropriate that his name is Framey. I'm anthropomorphizing, but roll with me here. But his name encompasses all of who he is. It's kind of like the angels. Their names are precisely who they are. They are their name, and they act only in that way because action follows being, if you want to go with that philosophical principle. So Michael, the prince of the heavenly hosts, is the strong arm of God, and that's what he does. He casts Satan into hell. There's Raphael, who's Raphael, I don't know if I'm saying it right. Put in the comments how to actually say it. Raphael. I don't know if you could put inflections in the comments. Raphael. I don't know. Anyway, Raphael, he's the healer. He's the healing touch of God. And then there's Gabriel. He's the mouthpiece of God. He's the messenger. So just like angels, how their name encompasses their whole being. And Framey over here, his whole existence is being a frame dummy. So his name encapsulates all of what he does as a function. But us as persons, Frame's not a person, remember, we're anthropomorphizing him. But us as persons, we have a name that encapsulates our whole story. And not only our whole story, but especially a story in relationship with others. But most especially those who call us by name. Meaning those who, by our very relationship, help us to know who we are. They kind of name us by being in relationship with them. And that's actually why this season, especially if we're separated from those who are a central part of our story, that's why it's so difficult. But in the very fact that we can name precisely where the difficulty lies, gives us an avenue forward. It gives us a way of hope. And in order to really articulate that hope, and so it's not just in our heads as this theory on how to move forward, we need to get deeper into the meat and potatoes of this dynamic. And we have a very real way forward. So what are we waiting for? Let's just get into it. Okay, Father, 2020, we're all looking forward to this being over. The year's coming to an end. Hopefully the pandemic's coming to an end. That's unforeseen. Because I don't know how much longer people could just be so separated from each other in society and their family and friends. I know I have a lot of friends that are struggling with that. So where do we go from here?
Well, if liturgically or for the church, 2020 is over. So we're already in 2021.
So if you're Catholic, yay, 2020 is over. And if you're not Catholic, there's some food for thought.
Actually, I know psychologists, for example, tell us this is always a hard time of year, that people feel lonely, isolated. I think they're...
And COVID's just exacerbating that.
Yeah. But, of course, I'm not a psychologist, and so my advice isn't going to be psychological.
Well, is there like a clear boundary? Because I know a lot of psychological things enter into the spiritual realm, and spiritual meaning non-physical or psychological is not just the physical synapses firing in our brain and causing emotions and stuff like that. There's something spiritual to the psychological. So do you have a borderline there?
I would say the function or purpose of psychology is for us to help us cope. And so here's a situation, what are steps or what are the best ways of dealing with it? The spiritual life doesn't, it's not about coping, and it doesn't really give definition to things in the way that psychology does. It doesn't explain things, but rather, I think it gets to the heart of them. But the spiritual life begins with Amen.
What exactly do you mean by that?
Amen, let it be so, or it is true. And so what's actually at stake and what do we do about it? And so we're not coping, we're actually dealing with it.
So there has to be some sort of acceptance of the situation and moving forward to really be entering into the spiritual realm, as opposed to if you're trying to cope, then you might need some professional assistance with regards to that, or a really good friend to help you through it.
Mm-hmm. Well, and a good friend, and sometimes a psychologist is not a bad thing. However, again, that's not, I don't think it ever really gets to the root of things. The friend might.
Yeah, there's a spiritual connection there.
Exactly. So how do we deal with this spiritually? In a sense...
How do we deal with it spiritually?
What we call the holiday season, what I prefer to call Christmas, because let's name it, it is a time, first of all, of remembering. And there are ways that we remember. And so every family has its traditions this time of year. And surely the hard thing, or the hardest thing, is to be apart and not able to live those traditions together. Or perhaps there are folks who really have never developed traditions around what we call the holidays. And that's a problem. Why? The memory helps us realize who we are. What do I mean? If we had no memory, we would have no knowledge of ourselves at all. And nor would we have a language. Memory is absolutely essential for language. It's essential for self-knowledge. It's essential for our relationships. And how? Well, if I were to say, "Who are you?" and meant it, really mean it, how would you respond?
I'd probably tell you my name, start there, and then I get a little bit more into my history, and maybe I'll tell you a little bit more things that are intimate as I get to know you, about like maybe my hopes or something like that, or what I'm afraid of.
Exactly. In other words, you'd tell me a story, because your name alone wouldn't communicate very much to me. Your name is Sean, my name is Michael. They are two of the commonest names in the Judeo-Christian world. Everyone knows it, at least more than one. And so you're Sean, I'm Michael. What does that communicate? Not very much. But what's behind it is the story. And the story, for us, our story begins maybe 3. For those of us who have a really good memory. And
then there's the things that we're told about before we remember.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, and those are very important. But our memory of ourselves sort of starts in the middle. Our story is unfinished. And so our name carries us from our earliest memory until right now. And what happens tomorrow, we haven't a clue. But so our name, our story, and it's the things that we remember, the relationships that we remember in the telling of our story that are really important. So in your story, there are folks who cannot be left out. Starting with your mom and dad, otherwise you wouldn't be here at all. But then your mother, your father, certain friendships, they have a place in your story, and without them, your story wouldn't be yours. And so every time we introduce ourselves, in a sense, we're remembering who we are, how we belong. And to develop that memory is, in fact, essential to us. The promise that there is in your life depends largely upon your memory. What you can do, what you've hoped for, maybe what you've despaired of, but all of those things are your way of receiving what can be, what's future, what's ahead, what is promised. Because that's the other part, I think, of our name. There's memory, and then what is promised.
So what does the name or the remembering who we are have to do with this how to spiritually approach the situation we're in of being apart from others.
Well, how do we express ourselves with others? And actually, we do it with gestures, and very largely with what we call traditions. And I realize tradition is a dirty word, okay. We're supposed to forget traditions and move ahead.
The newest is always the best, and keep on moving forward in evolution of things.
Yeah, right. So dismiss all that stuff, and let's take a look. When I'm with a friend who I haven't seen for a while, what do? Well, we trade stories where we've been ever since, but also we remember together things that we've done. To the degree that there is a sort of tradition that we have with each.
So your encounters with your friends isn't just trying to create new stories, but I guess it is trying to create new stories because then you'll have stories to remember, but it's also participating, bringing forward the memories of the past.
Right, it's an ongoing story. And it's a marvelous thing that when you're with someone to whom you're truly close, even though you haven't seen each other for a year, you pick up exactly where you were before and continue. But we do it by ways of remembering together the events in the past and so on. And we may celebrate those things. Now at Christmas, with our families, with our friends, we precisely do that. And so there's a meal. The meal is prepared in a certain way, largely depending, I think, upon our ethnicity. If you're Canadian or American, it's generally turkey, ham, Brussels sprouts, which are always contentious. Some like them, some hate them. Yams, maybe, mashed potatoes, gravy. And then if you're Canadian, something like maybe plum pudding or mincemeat pie, which are very hard to find down here, by the way. If you're American, maybe apple pie, pumpkin pie, something like that for dessert. But the point is, there really are traditions. And we remember and we relocate with each other according to those traditions. So my first solution, live the tradition.
So when you say relocate, you're talking about more of a spiritual location, or?
We inhabit a place together, and the means by which we do that is through shared tradition. And so, if you're alone, one way not to be alone is to pursue the tradition. What do I mean? I remember Christmas in our family. My father was a great tease. And so we would get up in the morning, we would go to Mass, we would come home, we had to have brunch. We couldn't have any presents, of course, until we'd had brunch and gone to Mass. And then having gone to Mass and had brunch, we then, by the way, when we first got up, it was a little gift from Santa, and that was very exciting because it's
a little holdover.
Yeah, it's the last time we saw a gift until mid-afternoon because Dad liked to extend the day. And so after brunch, we had to clean up, and then we had to prepare the turkey and get the dinner beginning to go. And then in the middle of the afternoon, roughly, when even my mother couldn't stand it any longer, then we exchanged gifts. Now in my family, we still do this. We don't exchange gifts until mid-afternoon. Why? Because that's the way we do things. And also, it's a delightful way of remembering my mom and dad who are now in heaven. The tradition binds us. This is why, by the way, tradition is so important to the spiritual life and very often overlooked.
So would it help to look at the etymology of the word tradition then, so we could have a better imagination for what you mean by this?
Tradere simply means to hand on. So it's what is handed on, is what is traditional. And so in our friendships, we hand on. I remember a disastrous camping trip with a friend. Horrible. I blame him, he blames me. We fight about this whenever we get together. It's a tradition and it binds us. This is how we, the traditions of the great religions of the world, or any spiritual tradition at all, or a way of binding us back. It's what religion means, to be bound again, or to read both, but to bind us back to really who we are and what are our fundamental relationships. If you're going to be alone at Christmas, if you can't be with your family, if you possibly can, prepare the same meal, have the same rhythm to the day, get them on Zoom or FaceTime, whatever, and then toast, be together with them. The point is, you'll both be doing the same thing. This is how, if you can't be in family and a couple of friends can get together with you, then share traditions. But these are the things that root us.
So in a way,
rooted in memory.
So then, in a way, that when you're with your family doing these things and being bound to them, you're actually practicing some level of religion, even in the family.
Oh, absolutely.
So it's not just the institutional religion that people you often imagine, but it's this binding that you're speaking of. This tradition, even within the family, there's a religiosity to it.
Sure. If by traditional religion, or rather, if by institutional religion, we meant a religion without traditions, we wouldn't have religion at all. But neither would we have families or any spiritual life. And so I've always a little bit objected to. I understand what it's saying, non-institutional religion. I mean, but institution is just another word for tradition. We institutionalize relationships through our traditions, through how we do things together. And so you and I, over time, have developed certain traditions. You'll say something to annoy me, and you succeed, and so on.
And you call me impertinent.
Yes, I do. Those, and so on. Or we've institutionalized, in other words, a certain way of being toward each other. That's all that is meant. But this is so important. And because why? It tells us who we are, or it reminds us who we are, and centers us again. And it's the way in which we speak our name. Our story.
So then how does this again relate to what we do in this situation where we're experiencing that disenfranchisement from the world or from our family or from each other?
Well, again, live the tradition. And so replicate in your own room or apartment or house the way in which you celebrate Christmas with the family.
And bringing forward the memories.
And bring forward the memories, exactly, and stay rooted there. This is why, in a certain sense, we speak of covenant in the Judeo-Christian religions.
Especially with the Jewish tradition, because they have this notion of remembering things where it's not just thinking about the past, it's actually bringing forward that experience. And I think that's kind of what you're getting at as well, is to bring forward your tradition, bring forward your memories that you have within all of these relationships and actually live it again.
Exactly. Yeah, when the Shema of the Jewish people, hear, O Israel. Remember, O Israel, not just hear, but remember. All the Barakah, the great prayer form of the Jewish people, memory. Remember what our Lord has done, and therefore, yes, and therefore, what does He promise? The same thing is true in the Christian faith. What we call sacrament is simply what is handed on, what is remembered, and what is promised. What we miss when we're together is to celebrate together the promise of our relationship. But we call it up by our tradition, by memory.
So when we're lonely, that's kind of at the core of it, is that we're missing this celebration of the relationship, not just being near someone, but really experiencing that connection with a deep sense of joy, with a deep sense of unity, I guess you could say.
Right, and so do it.
So there's other ways to do it, is what you're saying.
Absolutely. But the means will be to live the tradition.
But you first have to say Amen.
Yeah, let it be so.
If you don't accept your situation for where you're at, then then all you're doing is coping. And you're talking about spiritually, we got to move beyond that in order to actually enter into the realm of the spirit.
Well, and by living the tradition, you are yes remembering, but you're remembering. You're putting it back together, and you're moving forward. In other words, you are commanding the situation, not simply coping with it. You are living it, and this is the invitation. Now, that's why, by the way, we're celebrating right now the season of Advent, the coming of Christ, the coming, the inbreaking of something new. And the way we do that is by remembering. And so John the Baptist appeared in the desert, fulfilling the prophecy of Isaiah, a voice in the desert crying out, "Prepare the way of the Lord." And all the people came out to him in the desert. Why desert? Because the desert was a place of the covenant. That is,
so he's going there to remember, or to live out that what he is remembering.
Yeah, exactly. And the people came out to him in the desert. What that means in understanding the scripture more deeply, a spiritual reading, if you wish, is that they came out, and because they came back into the desert, they were invited to remember the covenant.
So when we're in our deserts of this pandemic, we could invite others into that desert to renew the covenant there too.
Exactly. And so to receive again the relationship which constituted Israel as a people, the relationship, the covenant with God and with each other. They went out to the desert to do this. This is the significance in the scriptures of the desert. It's not just a forlorn place or a place of danger, of temptation, and so on. Rather, it really is the place of the covenant. And the Jewish people, the Feast of Tabernacles, going back out into the desert, remembering their Exodus experience. That this is a way of reliving it, and also orienting themselves to what is promised to them as a people. So I mentioned covenant. in a sense, it's not a contract. When you are with your family, when you're with friends, there's no contract. You do this, I'll do this.
It's relationship.
It's relationship. But there is something promised. And a covenant always has 4 features, okay? There's a covenant promise. There's something stipulated, and that is that we'll be faithful to each other. So there is the call itself of the covenant. What's that? Well, the fact that you discover together that really this was in some way intended, if we look at it in its depth, that it's you that I've come to know and not someone else. So there's a covenant call. Something is promised. What's promised? A future. That this will go richer. The promise of the new covenant for us is that you will not die, you will live. And there's a sign of the covenant. And the sign of the covenant, what is it? It's what's handed on. It's the tradition. So live the tradition, and renew it. And in that sense, get at the center of this. You're not alone. You can't be alone, really, because you have a name. And the folks who speak your name, who are part of your story, are still there. I sense the presence of my dad and my mom. Whenever I've lost something, I pray to Dad to help me. Because he had a wonderful devotion to St. Anthony, who's a saint for things that are lost. And Dad would simply pray, and there it would be. And so I don't have quite that ability, except I can borrow it. So when I lose something, Dad, come on, ask St. Anthony, will you? And almost invariably it works. Okay, this is silly. Is it superstition, whatever? Yes. But the relationship isn't. The relationship absolutely present to me. And it's present in part because of the tradition that's handed on, the traditions that we keep.
So when I first asked, I was initially imagining, what do we do when we're separated from those that we can be with physically? But you're saying this extends even further into those who have died.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Jesus once said, "I am never alone." Marvelous. In a certain sense, if to the degree that we really pay attention, neither are we. And so I'm not alone. And I'm going to celebrate right now the fact that I'm not. But I'm going to do it by the traditions with which I always renew my relationship to my family, to my friends. So see to the tradition. The dirty word that it is. See to the tradition. Live it. And therefore claim what is promised. For us, there is one who is coming, who has come, but who's coming again, and has destroyed death. It's marvelous. So that's who we're expecting. At the same time, live the relationship with your family, with your friends, with those whom you love, and claim a future with them. And in that sense, see to what is promised, see to the covenant.
Amen.
Amen.
Hope, not cope. We're here to hope, not cope. There's a ring to it.
Keep on messing up. Okay, I don't mess up anymore.
Based on a promise.
I try my best not to mess up anymore.
Okay.